Hey friends, Gary Shaw here, Administrative Assistant, Office Manager at Baylake United Methodist Church. A blessed holiday season and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all of you. Baylake is going to participate in something in the next couple of weeks called Winter Shelter. It's an important ministry of this church, not only for the people that it serves, but the people that are blessed by doing this ministry. I was a district superintendent in the Rhode Island and Southeastern Massachusetts district of the New England Conference. That area made up Rhode Island, part of Connecticut, about a third of Rhode Island, a third of Massachusetts. But on Cape Cod, there was a mission called Overnights of Hospitality, very similar to Winter Shelter. And many of the Methodist churches on Cape Cod would participate in this. People would be vetted through the Salvation Army, transported to the local church, get a meal, spend the night, get breakfast in the morning, and be transported back to Hyannis later on that day. I was doing a charge conference at the East Harwich United Methodist Church, a church that maybe had 80 people in attendance. And during the summertime, it had writers and artists and potters and all sorts of people. But during the off-season, it was filled with blue-collar people, landscapers, fishermen, office workers, laborers, things like that. During the charge conference, I posed a question. I said, what has happened in this church that has transformed your life or the life of somebody else? What has transformed your life or the life of somebody else? Dead silence. Until Lori stood up. Now, Lori was the lay leader. Lori was a 21st century hippie, I guess. She was a delightful person to be around and had a very, very generous heart. And Lori told this story. It was an Overnights for Hospitality, and she had just gotten through taking an adult course on being a nail person. And so she decided she was going to sharpen her skills with the women that came from Overnight for Hospitalities that particular day. So Lori went down to the church with all of her stuff, her case and her polishes and nail removers and towels and basins and everything else, and offered her services. And a woman, older woman, probably in her late 60s, early 70s, came forward, asked what Lori was going to do. Lori explained, and she assented to having her nails done. Well, she put her hands in a bowl, and they were soaking, and Lori took them out and did the cuticles and filed down the nails and asked her what color polish she wanted on her nails. They didn't carry on much of a conversation, but then Lori looked up, and she looked at the woman. She was holding the woman's hand in her hands. And the woman had tears coming down her eyes. Lori, sensitive to this, said, "I'm sorry if I hurt you. I apologize. Are you okay?" And the woman said, "No one has ever touched me with such care." Lori paused. Some of the members of the church conference had heard that story before. For others, it was new. For me, it was brand new. I said, "Lori, what did you do next?" And she said, "I don't know what came over me, but I knelt down and took off her socks and washed her feet. I didn't even think about it. It just happened." That story still gives me goosebumps to this day. Here was a woman who was trying to do a good thing, Lori, and a woman on the other side who for most of her life had been neglected. Perhaps even when she was touched before, it might have been in a violent way. But Lori touched not only her hand, but her heart and her soul in such a tender way that love, God's love, Jesus' love, passed through them. Now, you could say, who was blessed by this experience? Who received the gift by this experience? And Lori would tell you unabashedly that her life was transformed in a different way that day. She understood what it meant to be a servant of Christ. She understood a little bit more what Jesus was talking about when he washed the disciples' feet. She understood a little bit more what Mary did when she broke the bottle of perfume and anointed Jesus' feet. Her act was a gift of care and love and sacrifice. And for the woman whose name Lori couldn't even remember, she was touched by God through another person in such a way that a piece of brokenness in her was healed and transformed. Now, I don't know if you have plans for participating in the winter shelter or not, but I want to tell you this. I have seen in my ministry time and time and time again, people doing good things, good deeds, if you will, for others, only to have their own lives transformed in such miraculous and spiritual ways that Christ enters in, right? Isn't that part of Christmas? The dear Christ enters in. And I have seen others marginalized, on the borders, forgotten, get a sense of security and love that they don't get anywhere else in the world. Baylake during winter shelter is like the manger. Christ is the host. We are just the participants in the play. And we are trying to birth and make incarnate the presence of God for each other, with each other, and in each other. And I hope, if you haven't considered it yet, come on down to the winter shelter. Play a game of cards, a game of Monopoly, cook a meal, do someone's nails, play with Legos, talk, connect, and be the body of Christ. Thanks be to God. Merry Christmas.